All right, guys, we are on lesson 13D. We are going to be talking about amphibians. We're going to talk about where they live, how they reproduce, and what their bodies are like. So, first of all, amphibians are ectothermic, meaning that they're able to kind of maintain their own temperature and then it reflects what their surrounding is. So, their body temperature is not going to be constant, but it will kind of mold to whatever temperature their environment is in. They also have different stages where some of them are going to be in land, some of them are going to be in water. So, for example, the amphibians young, which is their babies, they will live in water. That's usually where they're hatched because that's where eggs are laid. And then once they become an adult, they will move on to the land for their rest of the life. And then they can go back and forth between being in water for some time and then also living on land. So this is just basically amphibians are actually known is translated in Greek as double life because they live in water and land. Amphibians also go through metamorphosis as they develop from a young to adult because they start off being aquatic, which means they live in water, and then they become terrestrial, which means they end up on land. Um, and only the amphibians that are vertebrates actually undergo metamorphosis. So, when amphibians are young or babies, they have gills. That's the main way that they are going to breathe and exchange oxygen and remove carbon dioxide. But as they become adults, they are going to, as they go through metamorphosis and become adults, they will have lungs. They also have pretty thin skin so that they can exchange gases with their environment easily, meaning that they have small blood vessels like capillaries that are very close to their skin so that the exchange of gases between oxygen and carbon dioxide can occur easily. Um, Now, amphibians will either live in the water or near water. It's an important part of their livelihood, but they will lay their eggs in water, and that's where usually the young thrive in water at the beginning. So, when they go through metamorphosis from a young to an adult, a couple of changes take place that are necessary for them to be able to survive in adulthood. One, they start off with lungs, and when they get to adulthood, they start off with gills. When they get to adulthood, they will get lungs. So that's one big change. They also get change in how many chambers of hearts they have. So as a young or a baby, they actually have only two chambered hearts, but then when they become adults, they actually they get three chambered hearts. They also go from two limbs to four limbs, and then they go from a tail to no tail or very small tail. So there's two types of groups when we talk about amphibians. There's adult with tails, and then there's also adults without tails. So some of them are going to have a pretty distinguished tail, and then some of them are going to have little nubs or nothing at all. So the ones that are tailless are going to be called, for example, frogs and toads. Frogs have pretty smooth and moist skin, and they will live near bodies of water. While toads actually have drier and rougher skin, and they look kind of like bumpy and kind of, um, they don't look wet. And they live far from water. They don't have to live near water. So the tailless ones are going, like the frogs and the toads, they will actually lay their eggs in the water, and then the eggs will then become fertilized externally. So they won't be fertilized inside of the actual frog or toad. And then when the eggs hatch, they become tadpoles. So that's when they have the gills, they have the tail, and they live in water at this point. Tadpoles, like I said, have gills and tails. They develop lungs after they go through metamorphosis, and then they will actually reabsorb their tails, and the tail cells and everything will be dissolved, and they will be reused somewhere else in their body for some other function or for some other body part. Um, so depending on the environment that the frog or the toad is in, it will affect the temperature of the environment will affect their activity. So, for example, when it's colder, they will go into hibernation. So frogs can either bury in the mud or they can hide at the bottom of a lake or a stream, and then just stay there and become inactive completely without eating or anything, go into like a deep sleep for all of winter. Toads can do the same thing, but they do it on terrestrial, so on land. So they'll hide in like moist soil um, somewhere and dig themselves a little burrow. And so, but during the summer, they're active and they're completely fine and can function normally. So hibernation occurs in the winter in the cold months, and then estivation occurs when it's really hot. And it just animals, the amphibians will naturally go through this process. So obviously in hibernation, when they are not as active, it's going to be very slow. They're going to use up their energy slower, so they're going to build up their energy and the fuel that they need for energy in the summer, and then it will slowly be used in the winter as they're hibernating. Okay, so frogs, as you all probably know, they usually eat like things like flies, but they can also eat things like worms and snails and slugs and very, very small animals. The main way they're going to catch their food is with their sticky tongue, which is super long, so they can catch things that are further away. And if you didn't know, frogs actually have very small teeth. They have these teeth that are not many, but just a couple you can see in the diagram. And they are used more for holding onto their prey than they are actually used for chewing. So they are located in their upper jaw and then in the front part. So the upper jaw is called the maxillary, so they're called maxillary teeth. And then vomerine teeth, which basically means they are in the front. Okay, so another thing that amphibians do that's really interesting is how they eat their food. So, one, they'll capture their food with their tongue, and then they will actually swallow their food by blinking. And when they blink, their eyes kind of bulge out of their like eye sockets, and then that will help them push down the food into their esophagus, and that is how they will first ingest their food. So if you look on page 291, take a couple minutes to read this. It's called The Frog's Tale, and then it will be an interesting excerpt to pretty much the frog that we kind of looked at, and then you guys can proceed with the rest of the notes. Okay, another amphibian that you probably heard of is a salamander, and they actually have tails. So when they are younger, they actually start off with gills just like the tailless amphibians. But when they develop into adults after going through a metamorphosis, they will develop and have lungs. Their skins are also able to have gas exchange. They're going to be thinner. And so they can exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. And most of them are actually found in southeast of the United States. Um, some of the salamanders are pretty, actually have really pretty colors like light pink, peachy colors, but they're pretty bright. And they are actually can be somewhat poisonous. So they actually secrete things from their skin that can make sure that they're safe from predators, and if you touch them, they can actually make your fingers numb and kind of have some kind of allergic reaction. And they're very, very small, less than 15 centimeters, and usually you can find them under logs or rocks. So if you do see them, I wouldn't touch them because you don't know if they can be harmful or not, but they are very cute though.